Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 2025 Southeast Collaborative Online Conference. My name is Laurie Thompson. I'm from the Tennessee State Library and Archives, and I'll be your host for this session, which is entitled Coalition Building as Self-Care. It's presented by Lisa Vargas. This event is made possible in part by the Library Services and Technology Act grant from the Institute of Museum and Library Services, administered by the State Library of North Carolina. The views, findings, conclusions, or recommendations expressed in this presentation do not necessarily represent those of the Institute of Museum and Library Services or the State Libraries of North and South Carolina. Please feel free to ask questions, make comments in the chat, or interact with other attendees and the speaker within the Whova app for this presentation. We thank you for being with us today. A brief bio about Lisa. Lisa Varga is the Executive Director of the Virginia Library Association, a professional organization representing more than 5,000 librarians and library staff in academic, public, and special libraries throughout the Commonwealth. Lisa is the chair of the Virginia Beach Public Library Board and a member of the Virginia Society of Association Executives and the American Library Association Policy Corps, working on the Unite Against Book Bans program. In 2024, she was named Librarian of the Year by Library Journal. Congratulations, Lisa.
Thank you.
She has presented locally and nationally on a variety of library and association topics and is a mom to 3 young men who all went through a reluctant reader phase. I love that bio. You did a really good job on that. Take it away, Lisa.
I appreciate that so much. Thank you, Laurie, and thank you for having me here today. We are going to talk today about coalition building as a self-care model. And I know this is kind of a strange thought, right? Whoever thought about self-care as coalition building? So I'm hoping to express that a bit as we go through this session. I hope I have a few fans of The Good Place in here, this show that examined these philosophical issues and pressures with this whip-smart comedy. So if I can make you laugh a little today, maybe lighten your load a little, or just think about the things that we're dealing with through a different lens, I will have done my job. Because, y'all, this saving the world stuff is really hard. It seems like every hour we are confronted with something new to be concerned about, something to stand up for, something to shout about. As we watch things seemingly spin out of control, it's a really good reminder for us to take a breath and remember our core values in library world. Those are access, equity, intellectual freedom and privacy, public good, and sustainability. Everything we do comes from these 5 elements. And this is actually how I came to the title of this program. And just this morning, I decided to see what AI perhaps thought of my subject. And because it's important to have different opinions and different perspectives, I started out with Google Gemini, and I asked, how is coalition building a form of self-care? And Gemini did not spare my feelings for a single moment by telling me that coalition building is not a form of self-care. Now, I disagree with this assessment, and so I tried to get some other sources. ChatGPT has my back. ChatGPT agreed with me that coalition building can be a form of self-care because it creates this supportive network that helps individuals and communities navigate challenges, reduce our stress, and sustain some long-term efforts. ChatGPT has a much more extensive explanation of this, and we'll go into some of those points as we get through this program. But I just wanted to use these new tools that we have at our disposal to see what they thought and what different perspectives they might bring. Now, many of us, when we think of self-care, I think imagine Instagram models or influencers telling us about skincare products, cosmetics, personal care products. And listen, I'm a sucker for those. This is not to minimize the self-care industry at all. But the other things that people are often telling us when it comes time for self-care is you need a massage or a fitness plan. Your mental wellness is really important, and it is. And perhaps exploring some holistic health practices. And I will say that as someone who might be a sucker for the personal care products and skincare and that sort of thing, I'm also really not great at making time for myself when it comes to those massages, those fitness plans, the mental wellness. And so it's really important for me to think about self-care from a different perspective and recognize that I'm not failing if I'm not going out and getting massages. I'm doing different things to preserve my mental well-being. And a lot of that is coalition building. When you look at the types of self-care, there are actually 8 different categories that we can find. So some of these are not so much of a surprise, right? Physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, intellectual, environmental, social, and the financial one really struck a chord with me because I feel like that's something that we don't necessarily, we've got all these financial pressures, but the idea of managing your financial situation as a form of self-care has its positives. It also stresses me out um, in a lot of ways, but it's good to know when you've got a budget, when you've got things tied down, that you're sticking to that, that you are preserving your own mental well-being. And self-care honestly has turned into a bit of an industry, right? Just a quick search. I have a Harvard Business Review article here on how self-care became so much work. There's also an article about how retailers can capitalize on these self-care trends. We're talking about things like journaling or some of other creative outlets, ways that stores and other locations have been able to market or create displays of items related to self-care. Just a quick Google search for self-care apps. My goodness, there are so many of them. Usually, when we see these things coming out at us, like the recent news and all of these executive orders, a lot of them come with these messages like, you need to do this, you should be doing this, write to this person, call this person, click this link. And you start to think, that's so much work. Who has time in the day for all of this? There are so many things to sign up for, so many things to lend your time to. We're at a really interesting time because post-pandemic or even during the pandemic, people really reevaluated what they were willing to give their time to. And so we saw a drop in some volunteer hours, but an increase in other things that people were doing for themselves and for others, right? We just saw this priority shift. Now it seems that every minute there's something to be concerned about. There's something new that might raise your anxiety levels. And we have to think about, how do we manage that, not just as individuals, help to manage that for our patrons, help to manage that if you're a manager, for your colleagues. All of those come into a certain hemisphere, and we have to try to manage all of it. A lot of those you need tos and you should tos and write to and call this person and email this and click this link does have a long-term purpose. So I want to go back to the chat GPT that agreed with me earlier about coalition building. And coalition building, according to this chat GPT, provides emotional and mental support, collective resilience, sustainable action that helps to avoid burnout. It provides empowerment and healing, and practical self-care through resource sharing. By building coalitions, AI says, individuals care for themselves while simultaneously fostering a culture of mutual support, resilience, and sustainable action. When we look at things like the emotional and mental support, being part of this coalition means that you don't have to struggle alone. When you share these burdens, when you talk to people about the common issues that you're facing, it has an opportunity for you to release the stress and prevent some burnout. It also gives you a sense of belonging. Um, Lori mentioned in the beginning that I was named Librarian of the Year last year by Library Journal, and what that has gotten me is access and invitations into some rooms I didn't have previously. And what it has given me is an opportunity to hear a lot of stories from people and then connect them with others who are having the same feeling. It has given people who feel alone and isolated a chance to talk to someone who gets it. I spent a lot of 2022 listening to crying librarians. My phone number was circulated around as someone who um, was helpful and willing to listen to folks. And it was really hard to take that all on. But at the same time, I didn't know how not to because I knew those people needed to be heard. And being heard is vitally important in this work. So, what if we looked at asking for help as a form of self care? Now, this is a big switch mentally because, as someone who does not typically ask for help, this was a big adjustment for me. What if me asking somebody to assist me lightened my load and it didn't make me feel like I was burdening them by asking? And I will say, and I'm going to overshare here, that this became vitally important to me when my husband passed away suddenly about 6 years ago. All of these people were offering to help me, and I was not someone who took help or asked for help. But as time went on, I realized I needed to get over that and start asking for assistance with some things because it just became too much. And so I've done a little bit of a deep dive on why it's hard to ask for help. A lot of people get pleasure from helping other people, but we find it difficult to ask for that for ourselves, which if you flip it around a little bit, if you realize how much you enjoy helping other people, and you do, your career path, your choice has been built on helping people get information they need, helping people find resources, helping people get through some really hard times in their lives. People might be willing, people are willing to help you in the same way that you're willing to help them. But it is hard to ask for help. And these articles are just a quick picture of articles from Stanford, articles from Harvard Business Review, just some websites to talk a little bit about why we hate asking for help. Asking for help, though, will alleviate a lot of the stress and concern that you have right now. So, my first thought in this is to organize your outreach. Some of you, your patterns of outreach and your patterns of collecting information and organizing it may look a little bit like Charlie's here from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. But if you stop and think about how can I find partners, how can I find people in my area that are doing some of the same work that I am, even if they're not librarians, they could be in the education hemisphere, they could be in all kinds of different places. How do I start to find them? And I will give you a quick cheat sheet option, and that is by looking for partners through the Unite Against Book Bans campaign. If you visit the Unite Against Book Bans website, there's a tab that says partners. And I'm just showing you a quick screenshot of the national partners. And obviously just the letter A because scrolling the list, it is ginormous. But if you look at something like this and you say, oh, ACLU, that's a national partner. I wonder if they have a chapter in my state that might be helpful. Yes, go to their website and look for your state chapter, reach out to someone there and say, we are concerned about preserving the First Amendment rights of our patrons. What resources do you have that we could share? And as you go through this list, you'll see that there are a lot of them. Just yesterday, the National Education Association and the American Library Association had a webinar to talk about the ways in which they're hoping to strengthen state relationships. So that would be the Virginia Library Association and the Virginia Education Association doing some work together. We've done a little bit of it in the past. We recently had the Virginia Education Association have a table at our conference in the fall, and it was a wonderful way for our attendees to walk by and say, oh, wait, I've heard of the VEA. What are they doing? And oh, those educators might be so relevant to the work that we're currently doing. They might have boilerplate graphics. They might have letters already ready to go to send out to people if we want support. So trying to find those partnerships sounds like a lot of work, but it turns into something that can alleviate a lot of work for you as time goes on. I will tell you that we have created partnerships with a lot of these organizations within our state. ACLU Virginia has been a fantastic resource for us when we have seen censorship issues, when we have seen First Amendment rights being violated. And just keeping those people in the loop for what it is that you're doing is really helpful. And so I started thinking a little bit about this, trying to summarize who is it that has been a partner to VLA over the years. I've been in this position for 14 years, and every organization listed here is someone that I have been in touch with at least once, or sometimes more, to ask them to help lighten the load, or to ask them, how can we help lighten your load? So, for example, working closely with the American Library Association, working with Freedom to Read Foundation. The Interfaith Alliance is another wonderful resource. They don't necessarily have state chapters, but their website, like Keep Our Bans Off Our Books and things along those lines, can be very helpful if you're in a situation where you need wording or vocabulary to help you explain to people how we shouldn't be using religion as a reason to remove or isolate or segregate books or materials. Media Coalition is an organization that we were connected with when there was a lawsuit here in the city of Virginia Beach, where a local individual filed a temporary restraining order against the authors, publishers, and distributors of A Court of Mist and Fury and Genderqueer. And Media Coalition had a big stake in this, and assisted with a lot of the support. And so since then, we've been able to reach out to them when we need help and say, this is going on in this area. What can you do to help support us? When it comes to legislation, I've met a lot of these different association folks in hallways or in testimony at our General Assembly, things like the Virginia Association of School Superintendents, the Virginia Beach Education Association, the Virginia School Boards Association. These are other groups that have like-minded thoughts, and if you have a chance to meet folks in your area that are doing similar work. I would say another place that is interesting to look for is every state has a chapter of the American Society of Association Executives. They are known as ASAE. So in Virginia, we have VSAE, and they have connections to all different types of associations in the state. This has proven very valuable because they now know me as the library lady. For example, last year in May, I was at a VSAE conference, and so many people came up to me and said, "Oh my goodness, I heard about that Girl Scout in Hanover, Virginia. Do you know anything about that?" And I was proud to say, yes, as a matter of fact, I do. And if you don't know about the Girl Scout in Hanover, Virginia, just Google it. Her name is Kate Lindley, Lindley, and the work that she has done to combat the censorship at her high school was really phenomenal. So all of these places are people, connections we have made that at the same time help us with coalitions and creating those the powerful policies that we need, maybe having people give a run through on words. These folks have been incredibly helpful, not just from a lighten the load perspective, but also from a decompression and talking to people about the actual way you're feeling about some of the things that are happening. There's a person who works for an organization on this list that they and I would jokingly, we would call it hate watching and rage texting together. So when certain bills were being debated in the General Assembly, we would be watching those in our separate homes and texting each other all of the things we thought were ridiculous and all of the things we thought were helpful. And just having someone to connect with it that level who understood what we were talking about was really great. And I will say that a lot of these organizations have reached out to me to say, "Hey, we heard this thing about libraries. Can you really tell us what's going on?" And so to be able to break down some of the confusion that social media and media created around a lot of these censorship issues, being able to say to people, there is nothing that meets the legal definition of pornography or obscenity in any of your libraries. Them hearing it from an expert gave them the confidence to then go and fight for their people in the way that they needed to. I would recommend that if all of this feels too overwhelming, you can come back to it at another time. You don't have to go out and start making these connections right now. Remember that this is years of work that we have done, breaking down silos and trying to increase communication. There are also other organizations out there like Red, Wine, and Blue that have giant databases of people segmented by geographic area, so that if you're having an issue in your state and you would like some assistance with like-minded people, you can reach out to them and say, do you have people in your area that can support us, that can step up and speak out or write a letter? And the thing too to remember is that a lot of people right now might be hesitant to put themselves out there, to stand up in a hearing, to go to the General Assembly or your legislative session. But sometimes self-care, I look at it this way. It means a lot to me to be able to send words of support to people who are going through really rough things. And so I keep some silly cards around and I mail cards to libraries that are having a hard time. And so that is also an act of self-care, in that you are able to do something that doesn't make you feel like you're being put at risk, that doesn't make you concerned for your job or being doxxed or anything like that, but just putting a letter in the mail to someone is an old-fashioned, but really, I think, important way to recognize people and the hard work that they are doing. This work is hard, and any way that you can take care of yourself is really important. So any of the self-care ideas from earlier, any of those apps, any of those products, any of those types of massages and or other items, I encourage you to do those if those are in your wheelhouse. If they're not, find other ways to be able to be supportive to people, and maybe find a way that you feel comfortable starting to ask for help. It's that first step that's really difficult. I really thank you so much for attending this bonus session. I don't blame you at all if you listen to this on 2 times speed because you're multitasking, but it means the world to me that you've taken the time to visit here and learn a little bit and maybe play around with some of these new tools. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lisa. I found so much value in that. That's really good supportive material. I appreciate it. And thank you everyone for attending our webinar. If you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out to the speaker or conference host using the Whova app. An evaluation is provided and the conference session resources and in the conference session resources, and we welcome your feedback about this session and the conference in general. Thanks everybody for being here today and helping to make the 2025 Southeast Collaborative Conference so very successful. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.